Going back to Berkshire, this has become such a gigantic conglomerate, more than 70 businesses, this huge insurance chunk. Bill, you as a board member, if shareholders started to say, wait a minute, maybe you should spin off a portion of it, well, I guess I should ask you guys first because you run it, but if the shareholders started to say, spin off a chunk to unlock shareholder value, what would you say to that?
Well, we would say that over time, we think there's more value that will be created per share by keeping the companies intact and adding to them. It gives us a flexibility in capital allocation that if we had a See's Candy all by itself or a Buffalo News all by itself, it would be a much less efficient operation in terms of the aggregate wealth that would be created from this group of companies.
So that's a no, Charlie?
Yeah, it's a no.
Bill, but then if the shareholders come to you and say, hey, you're on the board, we think if he spun off the insurance part of this, will you at least bring it to the table, would you?
Well, Berkshire, I think, has done a great job of saying what it's about and how it works. And the idea that when businesses are brought into the Berkshire fold, that they're treated in the same cherished way that the original owner of that business thought about it. I think that's a huge benefit, and we wouldn't go against that. And people buying the shares should know that's the policy.
So Berkshire has insurance, it's got big industrials, Ginsu knives, Fruit of the Loom, Garanimals. You can't convince him to buy a tech company, a high-tech company, Bill?
No, I think he's very wise in sticking to businesses that have a more predictable future.
You don't even really have a smartphone. You've got a cell phone, though, right?
I got a new cell phone the other day, the one that Alexander Graham Bell gave me. I traded in.
What kind is it?
I don't know. I just told my daughter got so ashamed of what I was pulling out of my pocket, and I don't carry it that often, but she just said, you've got to let me turn it in.
So the old one had pistons in it. It was
something like that, yeah.
You said somebody gave you an iPad, but you didn't keep it?
I don't have any of that sort of thing.
That must make you happy, Bill.
I'm pro-technology.
You're pro-technology. Well, it was a year ago you were sitting here and you said that Microsoft would shelve its smartphone plans, yet true to your word, you said it would possibly come back, and sure enough, in April, there's a deal with Nokia to put forth a smartphone to take on the iPhone. How are you going to beat the iPhone at Microsoft and Nokia?
Well, Microsoft's doing some very innovative work in that space. They fell somewhat behind in market share, and that's got them being a little bit scrappy about their ideas. They got great reviews for the latest version. New hardware's coming out, and then there's a even better version coming next year.
I'm very pro-technology. I just don't know how to use it. But Bill changed my life. I mean, the computer is a huge part of my life now. And 20 years ago, it didn't exist from my standpoint. And so I love it as long as it's doing the kind of things that I really care about getting done better or more efficiently, and it's easy to use.
I want to quickly go back to the Osama bin Laden news because we didn't get you, Charlie, to weigh in on it. But when you heard this news that Osama bin Laden has been killed, I know you guys. You think you spin things forward. You think in the broader sense. What are your thoughts on how this affects the world?
Well, he was an important symbol of a really crazy bunch of ideas, and so obviously it's big news.
Where were you, Bill, when you heard about Osama bin Laden being killed? What were you doing?
Warren and I were drinking root beer floats.
Our second one for each. Yeah. Yeah, we were at Piccolo's, and we were on our second root beer float, and each.
So you were on a sugar high anyway.
But we were elated.
What did you think about the news?
Well, I think a lot about what's going on in Pakistan because that's one of the few places we still have kids getting polio and getting paralyzed. And so I'm hopeful that this will strengthen the activities that go on there. It's a very, very important quest, and Pakistan has to do its part in eliminating that disease.
And eliminating terrorism. Does this make the world a more stable place, Warren?
Well, it goes in that direction, but the world is not a stable place, and it won't be a stable place. I mean, we will we will have to be on guard against people who think similarly. They may not have been as effective as Osama bin Laden was in the past, but there will be forever lots of evil people in the world, and lots of them will have their intentions directed toward the United States, and this country can never give up being vigilant.
Not only do we have those types of threats, but we have the tsunamis and the earthquakes. You talked about over the weekend how that affected the insurance business. But let's talk about nuclear energy. There was great fear in the wake of that. Do you think it was overdone, Charlie? Do you think nuclear is an important piece of the energy picture? I know Berkshire has some nuclear business.
Well, that's a very interesting question. All of our nuclear plants have more of those rods in storage than the plants in Japan that caused all the trouble. They'd all be quite susceptible to various terrorist acts. So nuclear energy has some special dangers that the other technologies don't. And I think when you have something this dramatic, it makes people worry more about the dangers. So I would not bet on a huge worldwide increase in nuclear plants.
Would you, Warren?
Well, I wouldn't, as I said, when it happened, I think the world should go more toward nuclear. And we're getting 20% of our power from nuclear power. I get my power partly from an OPVD plant that's located near here that's nuclear. But I think that as a practical matter, that this dramatic event will slow down probably rather dramatically the development of nuclear power.
Bill, you have an investment and a personal interest in nuclear power. I believe you're part of TerraPower, which is trying to do nuclear reactors smaller, smarter, cheaper, and safer, perhaps. And the nuclear core doesn't run so hot. How close are you to scaling this up and making it a reality for the rest of the world?
Well, if things go well, in the next 10 years, there'll be a pilot plant built to show that the safety and economics of that new nuclear design can be a lot better. The key thing I'd say is that we need innovations in energy, and whether it's solar power, wind power, both cost, safety, and environmental things need to be improved. And so you don't want to rule nuclear out, because there are ways of improving it that could make it a very good choice in the energy portfolio.
Gasoline is so high right now still. Even, of course, we're looking at oil prices today coming down marginally in the wake of the bin Laden news. Could high gas prices derail the U.S. consumer?
Well, we talked earlier about whether we need higher taxes. We've gotten higher taxes. The taxes are just being paid to OPEC. When the price of gasoline or the price of crude oil goes up, that is a tax on the American public, and it just doesn't go to Washington. So it will not derail, in my view, the comeback of the economy, but it's a decided negative.